Mr. Kerner, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. And as Mr. Kerner already said, the State Minister, Kramp-Karrenbauer, is unfortunately unable to be here today, as her schedule does not allow it. You may have followed it in the media. In August, she's going to be the successor of Peter Müller, our state premier. And this weekend, she has been nominated the head of the state CDU party at a party congress this weekend and is therefore unable to be here. This is the CDU in the Saarland. And she's asked me to present for her, which I'm happy to do. Mr. Kerner will have said this already. I am the director of the State Institute of Crime Prevention, which fits well because we do play a major role when it comes to crime prevention in our state. Now, what do I want to talk to you about? Well, first of all, perhaps a few just general statements about the need for crime prevention work. Then I'll tell you a little bit more about the situation in our federal state, the Saarland. Then I'll talk to you a bit about the various issues that we deal with, crime prevention on municipal, state, and national level. These are activities that we coordinate or implement. And then I'll conclude my remarks by telling you a little bit about crime prevention and what politicians need to do. This will be, however, the briefest part of my remarks. So first of all, let me just tell you a little bit about the question of prevention. We distinguish between risk factors and protection factors in crime prevention. You'll be familiar with this. The risk factors include all of the features that increase the probability of problematic behavior, whereas protection factors are factors that reduce the likelihood of problematic behavior. Now, Mr. Behlmann put together some risk factors, and you can see that there are individual level factors, there are also environment factors, nature and nurture, whether we're talking about school, society, these are issues, and the same is true for protecting factors. And just like the risk factors and the protection factors, these are always factors where there is empirical evidence that suggests that they are risk factors or as protection factors. Here too, you can see factors that lie within the individual, but some which are more in their environment. And for prevention, essentially what we need to do is try to minimize the risk factors and strengthen the protection factors. That this is the fact is something that Taushammer and Löbe have suggested, or Stouthammer and Löbe rather, who have set out which protection and risk factors there are and have looked at the difference between the two and said that if the risk factors take on the upper hand, then there is more liability for criminal behavior. So certainly the aim is to, of course, strengthen the factors that protect the individual from entering into a career in crime. So how did we proceed in the Saarland federal state here in Germany? Well, it was before 2009 the case that there was prevention work in Saarland. And we had a lot of projects as well, but these projects tended not to be coordinated and not to be linked with one another. Often it was the case that it was one hand not knowing what the other hand was doing. And because of this situation, the Saarland decided in 2009 to set up a State Institute for Preventative or Crime Prevention Activities in order to harness potential synergies and to prevent parallel developments or to minimize these parallel developments. I would say after 2.5 years of experience now, who are the organizations behind this Crime Prevention Institute? Well, there are 4 different ministries. 25 different employees were freed up by these ministers, seconded to the institute. We have close partners. we, working together with you, which is a crime prevention association aiming to prevent crime through sports, and this organization remains a close partner of ours. There are two principles that guide our work. One, it is our mandate, but also the mandate we've set ourselves to ensure that the programs we offer are available for the entire federal state. They're not programs that are just available for a minority. And another principle that we have is that the programs that we have to be sustainable. Sustainable in the sense that they can't just be short-term lighthouse projects where we perhaps attract a great deal of airtime and public attention, but rather that we ensure that these are all programs that are long-term and sustainable in nature. Let's have a look now at the actual mandate that our institute has. Well, first of all, we try to identify players and subjects that are important in the area of crime prevention. We are launching a crime prevention atlas online this week, where all of the organizations involved can provide details of their activities in our atlas, including both issue and location. We also acquire consultancy and advice from institutions and activities. We work together in the area of crime prevention with a number of different associations, offer programs together with cooperation partners. We also develop certain crime protection campaigns, and I'll give you a few examples of what we mean by this. And we also carry out crime prevention measures. I'll give you a couple of examples of that as well. We work together with multipliers. This refers to what I said before, that we always ensure that any program we offer is available throughout the federal state. And as is the case in the past as well, we work together with children and young people, whether they're in daycare centers, in schools, or in clubs. And this sometimes means that we are focusing and are not on individual groups and are not able to offer it throughout the federal state, but we do try to. So let's have a look at how we got set up. Well, in 1994, as in many other federal states, crime prevention councils were set up. There was one set up in ours as well. The then Saarland Minister of the Interior decreed that prevention councils be set up in 52 local authorities within Saarland. 22 prevention councils were set up later. There's been a certain stagnation now. There haven't been very many prevention councils set up recently. What we're seeing, and colleagues from other federal states are seeing the same thing as well, that there's a similar development. Oldenburg seems to be going against the grain here. But in Saarland, it's the case that there are very few active crime prevention councils. So in response to this, we decided to try and reactivate the situation by setting up security networks in particularly 3 pilot municipalities, where we carried out a citizens' survey to carry out a criminological regional analysis, and the steering committees in these municipalities, consisting of the mayor or the Lord Mayor and the chief of police, so that we could set up projects. And then, based on the outcome of these surveys, we've already analyzed the outcome of these surveys here, which the results and findings are being presented to the town council, and then we are going to be setting up projects there with the aim of attracting citizens, which is why we carried out the survey in the first place. And our institution is then going to try to support this network, and will look at the content and the structure and try to offer support where we can. So let's have a look about crime protection on a state level. We've set up a number of different programs. I've just noted down a few here. Once I saw how much time I have to speak, I realized that I'd actually set out too many points and that would really go beyond the scope of this talk, so I'm only going to talk about the points on this slide that are in red. Again, the entire list is just a small segment of all of the different projects that we offer, but perhaps you will get a sense of the principles governing our work when I explain them. Kindergarten Plus. This is a program to strengthen children's personalities in education and prevention programs for daycare. Obviously, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, as I said, so if there are good programs out there, programs that have been scientifically evaluated and for which we have empirical evidence of their efficiency and efficacy, that we want to pursue them. Perhaps you'll be aware of the fact that there are a number of different programs for preventing crime in daycare centers. Why did we choose Kindergarten Plus? I'll explain that in a moment. The program is comprised of 9 different modules which are carried out over 3 to 4 months. What's key to us is that this is a program that also qualifies the daycare workers. So it's not externals, people who come in and carry out the programs, but rather the daycare workers themselves are trained to be able to carry out the program, which is, of course, considerably more sustainable in nature than if you were to just send external experts in. One of the difficulties that we encounter in this context are the high costs for these programs. This program was set up by the German League for Children, and often you have a trainer coming from Berlin or from some other city to carry out the qualification 2-day program with the daycare workers. Obviously, travel costs are involved, costs for accommodation, and costs for their work. And so we sat down with the German Liga and the Alliance clubs in Saarland who support this program and have tried to come up with a solution. And we entered into a cooperation agreement with them. If this qualification training for daycare workers cost 800 euros in the past, as a real obstacle for many daycare centers who would otherwise have been interested in this. Now it is the case that we've agreed with the German Liga for Children and the Lions clubs that we have 3 trainers that we've had qualified. And we've also included a quality assurance inspection, as it were, for this training. And now we can actually train our daycare workers, the daycare workers ourselves. And essentially, if a daycare center decides to qualify all of their daycare workers, we go to them and train them there, and then they don't have to come to us, which is, of course, cheaper as well. Now, 5 weeks ago, we sent a flyer to all of the daycare centers in the Saarland state. 61 daycare centers have taken part in this program, and within 4 weeks we had 16 daycare centers registering. And I think one thing that's particularly good is that there are 2 local authorities who have decided to send all of their daycare workers along to be qualified. We're trying to make progress with this program in another way as well, and that is that we try to incorporate this module in the teach training component for daycare trainers. And we have now managed to make this be an obligatory component of the training of daycare workers here in Germany, or rather in the Saarland. Another aspect that we're involved in is training crisis teams for schools. After the situation where a student ran amok in Winnenden in March 2009, killing many students and teachers, we've set up a round table called Amok, set up by the former state minister of the time. And in September 2009, we've put together emergency plans for Saarland, which look much the same as those in other federal states. And these emergency plans essentially recommend the training of school crisis teams. We offer to qualify these crisis teams, and to do so, we've worked together with the Psychology and Threat Management Institute. Mr. Hoffmann runs this, one of the leading experts on students running amok in schools. And we developed a concept for training crisis teams for schools, and we worked together with Jens Hoffmann to put this into practice. We presented this at the school head service meeting, and since December 2010, this training session has been put into practice. It's essentially looking at a de-escalation pyramid. This is something we know from research with students running amok, that it's always just the tip of the iceberg, and the further up you are, this escalation pyramid, the harder it is to get involved and defuse things. And on the basis of this model, we try to train these crisis teams. We have 6 half-day modules. 4 modules essentially provide them with a theoretical background, although it's not just theory that we're teaching here, but there are role games and presentations, role play rather, and presentations where we look at the theoretical background. Then we have module 5. Perhaps it's worth saying that the first 4 modules take place in our Institute for Crime Protection, where we have crisis teams from a number of different schools coming together, groups of, say, 20 people being trained, while module 5 is carried out in the school itself with colleagues from the police force and from the school psychology service, where the individual aspects of the school are incorporated in the developing of a crisis team. And module 5 tends to last for it tends to be carried out about 4 weeks later, and half a year after module 5 we offer module 6, which is essentially a follow-up session looking at the crisis teams so far, exchanging experiences, looking at problems, and looking at how these problems could be solved should they have cropped up. Like I said, since December last year, we kicked off with this. Now, every month, we carry out this work. We've qualified staff in 34 different schools. Module 6 is starting off now in July, obviously 6 months since the beginning, and we've got qualification seminars booked for 2011, 2012, and we've even got some appointments in 2013, and the demand is high. Perhaps a completely different project now. This is our Bob campaign, which is about road safety involving drunk driving. Bob is the driver who doesn't drink, and you can see him because he's got a yellow keychain, and he gets free non-alcoholic drinks when he has this yellow keychain. In 2009, we introduced this in St. Louis, one of the counties in Saarland. We put this into practice here. Bob is a campaign from Belgium. It's been going for several years there. It's also been introduced in parts of Hessen, Rhineland, Palatinate, and Thuringia. We introduced Bob in Saarland as Saarbob. We have a 2-phased organizational aspect. We, as the State Institute, are, of course, taking on the coordination of the state, and we're trying to install local Bob teams in the individual municipalities, where we work quite closely together with these coordination teams. But on an operative level, things need to be done on site because it's really complex and multifaceted, and especially if you bear in mind that we're doing it throughout the state. So here we have the Bob driving school. It's possible because we had a trainee, a student who's a teacher on a teacher training school who also taught driving, and she wrote her dissertation on this subject, and she developed a component of the driving school training about Bob, and explained all about it. And now the whole Bob campaign is being taught as part of the driving school training throughout Saarland. Here you can see the various locations. There are 6 of these counties that are using Bob. You can see this. In 2, there are just individual municipalities doing it, though we are working to spread Bob throughout Saarland. We very much hope that the 2 counties that are still getting involved will soon be offering this not just in individual municipalities in their counties, but throughout the counties. Here's another example of a project. This is primary students in sports clubs. The aim here is to look for mentors in sports associations working with a prevention aim as well to ensure that children are physically active as a way of avoiding crime. You can see a couple of examples here of what we're doing. We work together with 3 artists here. Here we have a percussion musician, a singer, and a conjurer. And what we're doing in this program that runs from 9 till 12, where we have a number of different sports clubs presenting what they do. We have about 300 to 400 primary students present at these assemblies, and they get a free trial session in the various sports clubs, and they can also win prizes. Anyone in a club can get involved in these lotteries.
By now, we have already had 62 of these larger events, and I told you that we have 52 municipalities in the state of Saarland. This activity had been ongoing over the last 10 years, so each municipality had seen at least one of these events. But you know that after 4 years, obviously, the primary school pupils have totally changed, and this is why it makes sense to continue this. In 2008, this event had been evaluated by an external party, the Sports Science Institute of the University of Saarland, an evaluation including 13,000 pupils. And the result of this evaluation was that with the help of this event, it was possible to almost motivate half of all the children who have not been yet member of a sports association to become a member. And I think that this is even, or what is even more important, that a year later, 90% of those still were a member of the association. And then 2 further results. Those who had been member of a sports association had better school marks, and they were socially more active. I know that these are correlations which cannot be interpreted in a causal way, but the result was so impressive for me that I simply wanted to show this to you. Now a short remark on preventive action on the national scale. I've already told you that this is not the operational or conceptual part, but really a political part. Last evening, we had a meeting of all the managing directors of the state prevention councils, and there all rapporteurs told us that there are structural reforms among the police force, and in those federal states where prevention is very closely related to police force, colleagues told us about clear limitations for the future provision of activities, which is worrying to them. And this is why I think it would make sense to consider national prevention plans and national prevention strategies. And in this, the role of the different state prevention councils should be considered, because usually they have very prominent members, and we could also think about the role that the federal criminal office could play. And this is a point which should be discussed on the political level, but as The minister unfortunately had to cancel this appointment here at Oldenburg. We cannot do this today, but in a future date. So much from my side, and I would like to thank you for your attention.